The traveler is no gift, it is a lie, a beacon for death and destruction. Within be dragons, nurtured by our suffering, weaned on our hope. All dragons must die. The shell must be cracked till its yolk drowns those who worship its deceit. Our last great conquest, the crowning battle of our legend writ large. And then he shouted, "For light to endure, the traveler must perish." Hey guys, Crispy Bacon here with a different type of video for you today. This will be a lore video covering a specific piece of lore I found while finishing up the Chronicler's Seal. The lore drop is called Whether Windmills or Cranes. It can be found in the Tangled Shore lost sector known as Kingship Dock, and it reads as follows. We set out to challenge the unknown, he'd say. His quest was to become legend, to slay beasts and conquer terrible lands. His quest was honorable, though in the end misguided. No, not in the end, much sooner. The flaw in his ambition became evident shortly after we crossed the Western Mire. At first I took his flights of fancy as playful enthusiasm, frivolous aggression free of consequence, a means of honing his focus and skill in advance of the dangers to come. But quickly, oh so quickly, I found his mind was not in tune with reality. He was driven, pulled, by his imagination. Where any other would see the crippled ruins of an old world crane, the snapped length of its long arm creaking in the breeze, he would see a demon. And in the cutting shrill of the swaying metal's cry, he would hear a monster's ravenous shriek. He had long talked about the adventures of his life past. I am an anomaly, he would decree. The lone guardian whose past rings true, whose history is his guide. He spoke about that dead life with such passion, in such detail, I not only wanted to believe, I did. But as he charged the crane's age-poked carcass, I knew a truth that had haunted me since the carving of the wicked wood, some months gone. He was broken. His mind unsettled, his truths unfettered by fact, unbound by reality. He had named the wood, as he had the howling hills, the dead man's crevasse, the Gorgon's maze. All mundane landscapes marked as hazards to be conquered, enemies to be slain, as he weaved a mythic tale of his own grand and, as I would find, delusional design. In the hills, he slaughtered wolves. He called them hounds of hell. In the crevasse, he burned the remains of long-dead survivors. He called them foot soldiers of the Necro King. Down in the maze, he covered his tracks so that the Stone Mother could not follow. He did all those things, and none, because none of these things were true outside of his fraying mind. The wolves were simply rabid, the bones no threat beyond a reminder of all we'd lost. The maze, just a canyon, one way in, one way out, a straight shot through. As the crane fell and my guardian issued his killing blow, he laughed and then turned to me. His eyes, I could see he was gone. The one I'd returned all those cycles past, replaced by a hollow shell filled with madness. I do not know what broke him, or if he had ever been whole to begin with, but in that moment, as he spoke, the conquered husk of the dragon of Summer's End, which was not really a dragon but simply a fragile old crane, lying defeated in his wake, I knew I would have to let him go, to end his slide into uncontrolled folly. "Panza, old man," he started. "The dragon is gone, but he yielded his treasure to me in a whisper, a secret so dire it may just save us all." He leaned closer and said in a hushed voice, as if sharing a confidence, "The traveler is no gift, it is a lie, a beacon for death and destruction. Within be dragons, nurtured by our suffering, weaned on our hope. All dragons must die. The shell must be cracked till its yolk drowns those who worship its deceit. Our last great conquest, the crowning battle of our legend writ large." And then he shouted, "For light to endure, the traveler must perish." He was smiling, confident, manic. 2 days later, he took a fall while challenging the mountain troll of Gallows Rock. It was a boulder. There was no troll. It crushed him. And though it caused me great pain, still to this day, I did not return him. How could I? His diseased imagination would surely doom us all. Panza, lamenting the unfortunate necessity of leaving his guardian to remain unreturned. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's begin. First, it talks about a guardian who claims to remember his past. As we know, guardians can't normally remember the past they had prior to being risen by their ghost. They are essentially a blank slate, ready to defend the traveler in the light, albeit with differing personality traits. According to the unnamed character in the story, this is the first instance where a guardian can remember his past. His retelling of his past was so vivid and sincere that even his ghost believed in what he said. So with what is provided to us in this card, we must take that at face value, as we cannot know if he truly could remember his past at all, or if he was simply mad with delusions. More on this later. The most important piece of this lore entry to me is the secret that the Guardian relays to his ghost. He claims that the dragon of Summer's End, the crane, yielded its treasure to him in a whisper. Within the whisper, he pledges that the traveler is a beacon for death and destruction, and that within the traveler are dragons. He mentions that these dragons are nurtured by our suffering, weaned on our hope, and that they must die along with the destruction of the traveler. In my opinion, those are some bold and specific claims for someone to speak about blindly and with no basis. Instead, I believe that that whisper had a source, or a vessel, at some point, which leads me back to the topic of the Guardian's apparent insanity. The lore entry provides no obvious reasons for why this Guardian seems stuck in his imagination, with concepts of danger and peril manifesting themselves where they're not. However, I do have a theory. The recurring theme of this card definitely tends towards dragons. He imagines that the crane he fought was a dragon, and that this dragon told him the existence of other dragons within the traveler. In Destiny, the Ahamkara are the relevant reflection of the concept of a dragon. In this universe, the Ahamkara feed off of our desires and are able to make wishes a reality with some sort of cost to the user if possible. These wishes can even be granted by simply interacting with the bones of a dead Ahamkara. I believe that our insane Guardian protagonist stumbled upon an Ahamkara bone and wished to remember his past, before being a Guardian and before the collapse. He wanted to remember his life before immortality, and thus I believe this was the wish granted, the cost of which was his inability to separate memories of the past from his current reality. The foes and locales that he names and mentions to his ghost seem almost childlike in their identity and lack of depth. Places like the so-called Wicked Wood and foes such as the Hounds of Hell seem like nothing but a child's fantasy, an early imagined or retold fable of a hero's conquest over adversity. And so I believe that this Guardian's childhood fantasies took over his consciousness until his ghost believed he was so lost he should not be brought back, lest his conflicting existence continue to destroy himself and everything around him. Such is the scourge of the past. Now this may explain his insanity, but we have yet to speak about that fabled whisper. The whisper seemed very pointed and focused, unlike the Guardian's erratic behavior and delusions. The Guardian's past behavior always reflected the simple philosophy of the triumph of good over evil. However, this whisper does not seem to match that sentiment, instead pushing the idea that the Traveler is evil and must be destroyed. This hatred for the Traveler sounds more like the opinion of a servant of the darkness. So how would this whisper pop into our Guardian's head? I believe that too could stem from the theorized interaction with the Ahamkara bone. In many lore entries, Guardians who have interacted with or been near Ahamkara tend to be affected by whispers even after the fact. These whispers are, among other possibilities, the Ahamkara attempting to manipulate their target into wishing, their main source of sustenance, the satisfaction of one's desires made manifest. Thus, these whispers could be left over from a possible interaction with the Ahamkara bone ringing clearly in our Guardian's head. Another feasible alternative is that the Guardian in this story was somehow closely involved with the darkness itself. Similar to the Ahamkara, the darkness seems to corrupt the mind of its targets with whispers as well. Such can be seen in the Book of Unmaking lore entries and many other stories involving the darkness. There are still questions about the relationship between Ahamkara and the darkness, as there are many links between the two, including the worm gods themselves. However, I don't believe I have enough evidence to begin speculating one way or another about the involvement of the darkness in this story. Regardless of what force drove those whispers into the Guardian's head, the whispers told him that there are dragons within the Traveler and that all dragons must die. At first, I thought this might be a metaphorical statement, as dragons are often synonymous with chaos. The follow-up sentence referring to the nurturing and weaning of these dragons on our suffering and hope makes me think otherwise. Along with the proclamation of death, it seems plausible that these whispers are stating that dragons do actually exist within the Traveler. We really have no idea what is inside the Traveler, aside from the small viewpoints we can get between the broken cracks on the Traveler's exterior, as well as the shard of the Traveler in the EDZ. The only other account related to the inside of the Traveler is Fenchurch Everest stating that it smells faintly of vanilla. Could there really be dragons inside of the Traveler? If so, are they dragons of light? The Whisper states that the yoke should drown those who worship its deceit. The word yoke is traditionally used to describe part of an egg, which in time will hatch and awaken new life. Could the Traveler really be an incubator for a light-bearing Ahamkara species? If this lore card in particular is to be taken seriously, I believe so. There are multiple references that may link dragons and the light together, and I'll leave those in the description. The only alternate theory I can think of is that this poor guardian is just truly mad, and his ramblings are completely baseless and misguided. Although that is possible, I don't believe that to be the case. The lore of Destiny is extremely well written and commonly contains a lot of foreshadowing. For there to be such a detailed piece of lore surrounding a character spouting absolute nonsense would be lacking in purpose and meaning to the overarching narrative. I believe instead that this story's focus on the Guardian's apparent insanity is meant to serve as a misdirection, making us more easily question the whispers that plague his mind. What I don't quite understand is why either the Darkness or Ahamkara would wish death upon other dragons, but just like all of my other theories on what this information means, only time will tell. If you have any ideas about this possible theory, please comment with any thoughts you might have. If you want to continue the conversation, join up on our Discord in the description. We'd love to have you there. Also, following on Twitch is a great idea, since there'll be some opportunities for you to grab some free stuff in the coming months. As always, just wanted to say thank you all so much for watching and supporting. Have a good one.